Chapter 1891. A fan refused to let it go and pressed on. But Mitch's face is swollen. We all saw it, and now you say it's just a misunderstanding? Mitchell had no other choice but to step in to mediate the situation. Why don't we all take a step back, okay? Please, I don't want anything bad to happen to you all. He portrayed himself as a gentle, kind, and forgiving man. His fans were relieved, but at the same time, they loathed Daisy even more. Susan walked up to Daisy and said, "Miss Vanderbilt, Mitch already said it's a misunderstanding. Can we let this slide now?" Daisy ignored her and approached Mitchell. "Mr. Santos, before we started shooting, I asked you if we're going to fight for real or not, am I right?" Mitchell was momentarily stunned, but he soon regained himself and smiled. "We did discuss it before. Since we've discussed it before and you've agreed to it, I fought you for real when we started shooting, and I did apologize to you after we finished the shooting. Did you not explain to your fans?" Mitchell's expression changed after what Daisy said. His fans looked at each other, and it was apparent he had not told them about Daisy's apology. Susan bit her lips. Since when did she apologize to him? Why didn't I know about that? No way. I can't let her turn the tables around. With that thought in mind, Susan said, "Are you sure you've apologized to Mitch, Miss Vanderbilt? Why do none of us from the crew members know about it?" Someone was lying. That was the first thing that appeared in everyone's mind, and Mitchell's fans were more willing to believe that Daisy was the liar. If you've apologized to Mitch, why didn't he tell us about it? Do you really think that you can have everything your way just because you're one of the Goldmans? Susan looked at Daisy with a triumphant smile. That's right. Keep it going. As long as Mitchell did not admit she had apologized, no one would know about it. Smiling, Daisy looked at Mitchell again and asked, "Mr. Santos, are you sure that I didn't apologize?" Cold beads of sweat were oozing out of Mitchell's forehead. If he admitted it, his fans would think that he was a liar. He took a deep breath and said, "Miss Vanderbilt, how about this? Let's move on from this matter. I'll apologize to you, all right?" Daisy smiled at him, sending a chill down Mitchell's spine. "Since you refuse to reveal the truth to your fans, there's nothing I can say. Mr. Santos. Although it's not wrong if you wish to keep a positive image in front of your fans, there is a line that we should never cross no matter what." After that, she looked toward Susan and continued, "I hope you won't regret it." Susan shuddered in fear. She did not know what Daisy was trying to say. Was she threatening them? Mitchell's fans became even angrier after Daisy left. What the hell? She's the worst person with the worst personality I've ever seen, yet she won the Best Actress award. What a joke. Unexpectedly, not long after this, a video showing Daisy apologizing to Mitchell after the shooting appeared on the internet. In the video, Mitchell accepted her apology. There was no such thing as Daisy refusing to apologize and acting arrogantly after hitting him during the shooting. The crew members released this video, and the tables started to turn again. Mitchell was criticized for being a hypocrite and an attention seeker, and even his fans were ridiculed for their stupidity. At Tenet. Charlie had taken note of the things happening on the internet and chuckled. As expected of my artist. She did a pretty good job in solving this problem. He did not even need to do anything. Mr. Gray said, "This wasn't Miss Vanderbilt's fault. I heard from her assistant that Mitchell didn't go easy on her either when he was hitting her. Besides, she didn't ask to stop when her arm swelled up after he purposely lashed at her with his whip." Chapter 1892. Besides, I heard from the rumors that it was Susan who instructed Mitchell to make things hard for our artists. Charlie rose to his feet. Is that true? Billy nodded. Although both Mitchell and Susan work under Zester, they have gone overboard this time. It was clear how hypocritical Mitchell was, judging from the fact that he refused to admit that Daisy had apologized before and make any explanation while allowing his fans to attack her. Charlie hated it with a passion when artists made waves behind other people's backs. Even though they were not from Tenet, he would not just sit by and let other artists bully his artists. It seems like I need to make a trip to Zester. Freya, who was standing outside the door, left quietly. She came to the emergency exit and made a call to Daisy. I asked Mr. Gray to tell Mr. Johnson about it. Mr. Johnson is going to Zester right now. It's a shame I didn't get to record the video of that shameless couple. If she had recorded them, she was certain that it would be something that would shake the entire internet. Daisy chuckled. Freya, I didn't know that you were so bad. We're just giving that couple a taste of their own medicine for what they did to you. Besides, you barely gave him what he deserved by just slapping him twice. Freya was right. Daisy was going easy on him by just slapping him twice. Daisy suddenly remembered something and said, "Oh yeah, Freya. Please come to the Goldman mansion with me after I finish with work." Freya was stunned. Are you serious? Go back to the Goldman mansion with her? Daisy said, my mom has been wanting to see you for a long time. Besides, I promised her I'll introduce you to her. Freya pressed her lips thin and said, Daisy, can I say no? She was not afraid of meeting Maisie. She just did not want to run into Colton. Given Colton's personality, if he learned that she went to see his mother, he would certainly make fun of her. Daisy thought she was afraid of meeting her mother, so she said, don't worry. My mom is a good person. That's not the problem, Daisy. Freya did not know how to explain it to Daisy, so she said, I haven't prepared myself yet. Please give me some more time. Daisy did not press on. All right, then. You can come with me after you've prepared yourself. My mom will be very happy when she sees you. After they hung up the call, Freya leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. She did not have the guts to tell Daisy about what was happening between her and Colton. They weren't in a relationship. At most, she was just Colton's booty call. Charlie went to Zester. He had worked in Zester before, so he scolded Yale, Mitchell's manager, immediately after returning there. Yale knew what Mitchell had done, so he lowered his voice and said, Charlie, I'll look into the matter myself. You are making things hard for Zester by coming here immediately and making a scene. I'm making things hard for Zester? Charlie sat with his arm resting on the back of the seat. Your artist bullied my artist, and you want me to stay calm? If it hadn't been for Zester not doing anything about Mitchell's actions, would my artist have needed to go out of her way and solve the problem herself? Yale took a deep breath and said, Charlie, I said I'd look into the matter myself. If it's really Mitchell's fault, I'll force him to apologize in public one day. That's not necessary. A voice rang out from the door. Charlie turned his head around, and the man that stepped into the office was none other than the associate director of Zester, Triden. Chapter 1893. Yale rose to his feet. Mr. Gallagher? I already know what is going on. It was Mitchell's fault. He shouldn't have twisted the truth and made waves. He should apologize. Yale was stunned and fell silent. Hector had handed all the management of Zester to Triden. However, Triden hardly ever cared about the things that happened to his artists. After all, his staff and the managers would take care of all the problems. Therefore, it was definitely not a simple matter since Triden had stepped in. Charlie rose to his feet and said, That's more like it. I'll go back and wait for your good news then. Triden did not stop him. After Charlie was gone, Yale asked, Mr. Gallagher, you've got to think twice. Mitchell has brought a lot of profit to the company. His achievements and status are there for all of us to see. Even though the whole incident was caused because of him on the internet, we need to ask him what happened first. Triden turned to look at him and said, There's no need to ask him anymore. Tenet Media has all the evidence for the things that Mitchell did. If he refuses to step forward and apologize, he won't be able to stay in the entertainment industry anymore. Yale was stunned. In other words, his career as an artist would be destroyed. Yale did not expect it to be so serious. Did Mitchell really do anything overboard? Triden turned around and stopped in front of the door. Is Susan one of our artists? Yale snapped himself out of his thoughts and replied, yes. She's a B-list artist, and her manager is Zuini. Get Zuini to come to my office. After he finished speaking, he left the office without turning his head back. There was a black car not far away from Zester. Knowles was sitting in the back seat and reading a document in his hand. Edison came into the car and said, Sir, I've already informed Mr. Gallagher from Zester. By the way, are you not worried that Zester will do everything they can to defend Mitchell? Knowles lifted his eyelids and collected all the documents. Mitchell is an A-list artist in Zester. If Zester really wants to make every effort to defend him, well, of course, they can do that. But they have to make a trade-off. Edison was stunned. Trade-off? Knowles looked into the street through the window and continued. If Zester wants to keep Mitchell, they'll have to give up on Susan. If Mitchell is smart enough and doesn't want to lose his job, what do you think he will do? Understanding soon dawned upon Edison as he said, he'll sell Susan out. When Susan is pushed to the corner, she'll certainly retaliate. So, you want to create a situation where both of them will fight each other. Knowles retracted his gaze and chuckled. If not, they're too free. Edison shook his head helplessly. He knew that Knowles was just helping Daisy to get her revenge. They did not need to do anything against those bad remarks and comments against Daisy. They just needed to make Mitchell and Susan fight against each other, and the rumors would fall apart by themselves. 2 days later, Mitchell published a post and apologized to Daisy. He also admitted that he did not explain to his fans and caused the misunderstanding. Because of his explanation, Daisy got quite a lot of new fans. This was because she did not explain or complain about the misunderstanding. In comparison, those magnanimous words that Mitchell said now sounded hypocritical, and Mitchell was branded as a hypocrite by the people. Daisy did not have any shooting today, so she invited Freya to have lunch in a restaurant. I didn't expect Mitchell to apologize so soon, Daisy said as she took a sip of water. Freya knew why Mitchell would apologize so soon, but she just chuckled. Maybe someone helped you. Daisy was curious as well. I didn't know that Charlie could affect Zester's decision either. Freya did not say anything. Knowles had told her not to tell Daisy he was the one who helped her. This was because he was worried that Daisy might not like it when she found out he had interfered. Chapter 1894. Daisy wanted to rely on herself in the entertainment industry. She didn't even allow her family to help her. Yo, what a coincidence. James' voice rang out from the back. Daisy was stunned and turned her head around. What are you doing here? Even though James covered his face entirely with sunglasses and a face mask, his flamboyant outfit still sold him out. People would know it was him at first glance. He took off his sunglasses and face mask, grabbed a chair, and sat down. Well, it seems like fate really likes to bring us together. He kept his gaze glued on Freya while talking, and it made Freya uncomfortable. Daisy glanced at him and said, "Are you here to bum meals off me?" He clicked his tongue and said matter-of-factly, "Of course, I'm here to bum meals off you." Freya and Daisy fell silent. He told the waiter to bring him a set of utensils and a menu before turning his head to Daisy. "I heard that Mitchell was forced to apologize to you for what he did behind your back. He's not the main culprit. By the way, this has something to do with you as well." After all, Susan was James' diehard fan. James was stunned. Hey, it wasn't me who asked him to do that. You mustn't push the blame on me." Daisy did not know what to say. His brain worked differently from other people, and she couldn't keep up with him. James did not continue the topic anymore. He turned to Freya and asked, "Is there anything else you want to eat, Freya? Feel free to order anything you like. Don't be shy. It's on me." Daisy stared at him. Freya did not expect James to be such a passionate young man, and it seemed to her that he was a little bit too enthusiastic. She forced a smile on her face and said, "Thank you, but I'm full now." James rested his face on his hand and smiled. It's okay. We can have a meal together sometime. Daisy narrowed her eyes. Does he have a thing for Freya? At that moment, a couple appeared in the restaurant and caught her attention. The man was none other than her brother, Colton, but she had never seen the woman beside him. Freya followed her gaze and was stunned. The woman beside Colton was not the kind of woman that one would not find attractive at first. Instead, she was the kind of woman one would realize was easy on the eyes over time. She was pleasant to the eyes, and the more one looked at her, the more they would find she was pretty. She had a gentle disposition, and it was apparent she came from a prestigious family. When Freya crossed gazes with Colton, she turned her head away, and a surge of disappointment overwhelmed her. Colton stopped in front of their table, and it was only then Daisy returned to her senses. She forced a smile on her face and said, "What a coincidence, Colton." "Yeah," he replied flatly as he glanced across Freya. "It's really such a coincidence." Freya lowered her head to drink her water and did not say anything. Daisy asked, "Colton, who is this?" Colton did not say anything, and the woman smiled. "You must be Daisy, right? Nice to meet you. I'm Giselle Peterson, Mr. Goldman's friend." James felt that he had heard the name somewhere. He searched his memory for a moment and said, "Are you Giselle Peterson, the ballet dancer?" Giselle was the daughter of Gordon Peterson, the CEO of Cloud Capital Incorporated in Houston City. It was all thanks to Nolan that Cloud Capital Incorporated could get the project in Hydra Lake East District. Therefore, they have been keeping a good business relationship with Black Gold. Giselle was a ballet dancer. She studied abroad and only returned home recently. James knew Giselle because he had heard someone mentioning her name when he followed his father to a banquet in Houston City. It was only then Giselle saw James. She smiled at him and said, "You're James Tell, right? Do you know me?" Chapter 1895. James waved his hand. "Nope. I just heard of your name. But it seems like you know me." Chuckling, Giselle replied, "Well, I'm pretty into the entertainment industry as well, and you're rather popular, Mr. Tell." James clicked his tongue and did not say anything anymore. He assumed she must have known him due to his scandals, but he did not mind it. Besides, he was not into a pretty and fragile girl like Giselle, so he did not really care how she had learned about him. Giselle turned her head around to look at Colton and asked gently, "Mr. Goldman, aren't we going to have a meal?" Colton loosened his tie absent-mindedly and asked, "Do you mind if we eat here?" Giselle was stunned for a moment, but she soon regained her senses. She let out a smile and replied, "Of course, I don't. I can make use of this chance to get to know your sister too." Daisy smiled at her. Colton sat down, and Giselle took the seat next to him. All five of them sat around the table, and the atmosphere was awkward. Freya did not say anything from the beginning, while Daisy and James would chime in from time to time. Most of the time, it was Giselle who was talking, and Colton did not talk much either. Daisy and Freya had almost finished their meals, so they asked the waiter to take their dishes away. When the new dishes were served, Freya did not touch them, while Daisy only ate the fruit. At that moment, James took a piece of fruit and put it on Freya's plate. Colton looked at Freya expressionlessly. Freya turned her head to look at James and said, "Thank you." Grinning from ear to ear, James said, "You're welcome." When Giselle saw their interaction, she smiled. "Mr. Tell, is she your girlfriend?" Freya was stunned. Before she could say anything, James chuckled and said, "I think you should ask Daisy that question." He threw the question to Daisy. Daisy put down her fork and answered, "Freya is my best friend, and she's still single." Colton's face turned dark, but nobody noticed it. He lifted his eyelids to look at Freya and said grimly, "It seems to me that you could make a good couple." Freya pressed her lips tightly. James grinned and said, "Really? Well, you two could make a good couple too, Mr. Goldman." Colton gazed at him but did not say anything in return. However, Giselle's face turned red with embarrassment. It seemed like she took the things that James said seriously. Freya lowered her head. She did not know why, but she felt suffocated right now. She took her purse and stood up. I'm full, so I'll go back first. She turned around and left. Just when Daisy was about to follow after her, James stopped her. I'll send her back. Your brother is here. Don't worry. I assure you, I'll escort her back to her home safely. Daisy did not stop him. Although James was sometimes quite unreliable, she knew he was not the kind of man who would take advantage of other women after spending time with him in the past 3 years. After all, he was not a playboy who liked to flirt with other women. In other people's eyes, he was just an unrestrained loser. After James left, Colton looked at the empty space, and his gaze turned cold. A few minutes later, Colton turned around and said, I still have something else to attend to. I'll ask my assistant to send you back. Giselle was stunned. They had sat down not long ago, and he had barely eaten anything. Is it something very urgent? Yeah, he replied and rose to his feet. Giselle watched as Colton slowly disappeared from her vision. She seemed a bit disappointed, but she also understood his situation. Daisy, is your brother always so busy? Daisy snapped herself back to reality and replied with a smile, I guess so. Ever since he took over Black Gold, he has been focusing on his work. Smiling, Giselle said, a man who focuses on his career is quite charismatic, don't you think? Daisy was taken aback slightly. She lifted her eyelids and asked, Miss Peterson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you have a thing for my second brother? Chapter 1896. Giselle did not seem to expect that she would come up with such a straightforward question. She was stunned for a split second and then laughed out loud. It's hard not to take a fancy to a man as brilliant as Coleman. Daisy continued to ask, have you known Colton for a long time? After all, she did not even know about their relationship. Giselle replied to her, we just met recently. My father wants me to take over Cloud Capital Incorporated and kept telling me to learn from him. Daisy nodded. Colton just happened to be walking to the parking lot and saw James reversing his car. The bright purple sports car was quite conspicuous among the black and white cars. James got the car out of the parking space, and a figure stood beside the car, knocked on the window, and motioned him to stop. He paused for a bit, lowered the car window, and looked at Colton. Is everything all right, Mr. Goldman? Colton's gaze quickly swept across the car's interior, and he realized that James was the only person in the car. Mr. Tell, aren't you sending someone home? James shrugged. How can I send someone home when that person has already left? When he went after Freya and caught up to her, she had already hailed a taxi and left. He had wanted to send her off, but he did not have the chance. Colton's rigid facial expression loosened up a little as he turned around. I see. It's nothing. You're good to go. James looked puzzled. Did he just stop me to ask me about this? On the other side of town, Freya arrived at the hotel and asked the receptionist for 2 pieces of paper and some glue. She then returned to her room, took a pen out of her bag, wrote a few large words on the piece of paper, applied some glue on the back, stuck them on the door, and shut the door hard. After packing her luggage, she returned to the room and turned on her laptop to look for an apartment to rent. In the car, Colton called Freya twice, but she did not answer. Given her temperament, she probably will start packing her luggage up and leave as soon as she gets back to the hotel. After arriving at the hotel, he went straight to the elevator and received a call from his assistant when he was on his way. His assistant said that he had picked up Giselle. He said lightly, send her back first. We'll talk about it some other day. He hung up the phone and stopped outside the room, and his eyes were fixed on the piece of paper. Dogs and Colton Goldman are not allowed to enter. The huge font filled the entire A4 paper as if the owner of the paper was afraid that others would be able to see it. He frowned, tore off the piece of paper, and laughed angrily instantly because there was another piece of paper behind it. Whoever tears the paper off is a dog. Colton took out a master key card, swiped it across the door lock, and got into the room directly. The room had been cleaned, and the luggage had already been packed. Freya was sitting on the single couch in the bedroom. Knowing that it was him, she did not even lift her head. Her eyes were fixed on the laptop screen, and she did not utter a single word. He threw the pieces of paper on the table. "Did you write these?" Freya sounded rather indifferent. "Don't ask questions that you already know the answers to." Colton stopped in front of her, propped his hands against the arms of the couch, and leaned over to look at her. "Did you just compare me to a dog?" She still did not look up. "How can any dog compare to you?" Any dog would win the comparison without having to put in any effort. He stared at her. "What's wrong? Are you telling me that you're jealous?" She stopped moving for a moment, closed the lid of the laptop, and raised her head. "Why should I feel jealous? You've made my life difficult enough for me, so why can't I express my discontent about that?" As soon as she said that, she pushed him aside, got up, and inserted the laptop into her bag. "I won't stay here for free. I'll pay the room fee back to you." Colton's brows creased, and he hurried forward and grabbed her wrist. "I seem to have said you're not leaving here before I get tired of you." Freya turned to look at him and scoffed after a long while. "You want me to stay in a hotel all the time, so do you plan to be my sugar daddy? What bargaining chip do you have to ask for that?" His gaze looked way too sharp. It felt like a knife had sliced her hand, but the cut was not deep enough, and he poked at the wound repeatedly, making it unbearably itchy and painful. Chapter 1897. Freya turned around and faced Colton. "Isn't getting fucked by you a bargaining chip? I dare you to stop touching me from now onward." Colton bulged his cheeks and laughed. "So, is that how you see yourself?" "I've never thought about being her sugar daddy. If that were the case, why would I suggest hiring her as her personal assistant Daisy? However, to her, deep down, what I did to her was just a way to make it up for her to sleep with me, and nothing else." Freya shook his hand off. "Is how I see myself that important to you? Then may I know how you see me as a person?" Colton pursed his lips tightly. The atmosphere in the room was stagnant for a moment, and he took the initiative to take a step backward and soften his attitude. "Have you found a place to live?" Freya was astonished, and a hint of suspicion flashed across her eyes. "How is he so easygoing today?" "If you haven't one, you can still stay here for the time being." Colton took the bag in her hand and put it away. "I'll be very busy these few days, and I won't have the time to come over here. If you need anything, just let the front desk know about it, and of course, you can still call me too." Freya was surprised. For so many days, he's never told me anything that he's going to do. He only came and left as he wished. And I deliberately made such a huge fuss and talked back to him without showing him any respect today. Given his temperament, how could he have tolerated me this far? Also, he paused for a few seconds and then stared into Freya's soul. "Don't get too close to James." He did not like the way James looked at her. It seemed that he was blatantly trying to snatch his woman from him, and that made him feel irritated. Freya was absent-minded and did not say anything. 2 days later. The argument between Mitchell and Susan spread like wildfire on the internet, and both of them had completely turned against each other. Susan suggested on her Instagram account that Mitchell had coveted her for a long time, flirted with her several times, and also uploaded screenshots of the ambiguous and flirtatious messages that Mitchell sent her. The public had initially branded Mitchell as a hypocrite, but now, his public image was completely ruined because of the conversation history that Susan published. He had lost more than 300,000 followers across all his social media accounts overnight. Susan's move caught Mitchell by surprise, but he was not prepared to be outdone and give up. As such, he immediately exposed parts of his chat history with Susan. Mitchell had transferred money to Susan many times, and all of them summed up to a total of $75,000 from beginning to end, and Susan had accepted his money open-handedly. In the conversation history, Susan's tone seemed particularly flattering as she was chatting with Mitchell. The two had created a lot of stir on the internet. Their fans were at each other's throats more intensely than when Daisy's incident was at its peak back then. Susan and Mitchell's image dropped unexpectedly from heaven to hell overnight. Perhaps the two had attracted too much public opinion to the crew, which affected the filming process. In addition to that and the pressure that Susan and Mitchell were bringing to everyone around them, the director had to cut down all the male lead scenes and give more scenes to James instead. At Tenet, in the administrative office. The chairman and Knowles were sipping tea in the office. "Mr. Knowles, you've joined us for such a long time. Don't you plan to make the news public?" Other than the chairman, Mr. Gray, and Daisy, no one else in the agency knew that Knowles had become one of Tenet's shareholders. In the eyes of insiders, he was still a mysterious figure. Knowles picked up the teacup and removed the tea bag. "There's no need to make it public. I'll just stay behind the scenes." The chairman looked at him. "Mr. Knowles, in fact, I've always wanted to ask. Why did you invest in our company?" He had been in Bassburg for so long, and he had never heard of or met with such a person before. Thus, he could tell Knowles was not from around the city. But he could see that Knowles had an extraordinary identity and status since he was able to invest so much money without any hesitation. He was either filthy rich or from a noble family. Knowles drank the tea slowly and lifted his gaze slightly. "It's because of my fiancée." Chapter 1898. The chairman was startled. "And your fiancée is?" Knowles laughed. "Tenet only has one Best Actress." The chairman was surprised that it was Daisy. Knowles left the administrative office and went straight to the studio, where Daisy was at the moment. The studio had a dressing room, a powder room, and a photo studio. There were magazines and posters displayed on the bookshelves, all of which were Daisy's portraits and personal interviews. "James, can you be a little more serious?" Daisy's voice came from inside the studio. He stopped at the door and glanced through the glass and the tassel curtains. Daisy was sitting on the couch and holding a script in her hand with her legs crossed. The man sitting opposite her giggled and said, "Don't get so worked up. We still have a few days left, don't we? So don't worry, I'll get familiar with it for sure. I don't believe in your horseshit. He's never been reliable ever since we started filming." James raised his head. "Hey, why isn't Freya here today?" Daisy asked him directly, "Are you trying to court her?" He scratched his cheeks. "A little bit. That won't work. You and Freya don't suit each other." "Why don't we suit each other?" James' tone became serious. "Am I not handsome enough for her?" Daisy took a better look at him from head to toe and snorted softly. "If you want to talk about looks, my eldest brother, second brother, and my fiancé are much more handsome than you are." James choked. A burst of laughter came from outside the door. Daisy was astounded and suddenly shot up from her couch. "Knowles?" James turned his head. "I've never seen the man at the door. Could he be one of the new artists? Damn. He actually looks more handsome than I do." Knowles leaned against the door and gave off a faint smirk. "Am I bothering you?" "No, no." Daisy was afraid he would misunderstand them, so she went straight to him and explained, "We're practicing with the script." James smelled something fishy and rubbed his chin. "Daisy, who is he?" Daisy stood in front of him with her arms akimbo. "You can't even see it now?" Knowles' lips curled upward slightly, and his gaze was gentle as he wrapped his arms around her waist. "I'm her fiancé." James' jaw dropped in shock. "She really has a fiancé? How come I've never seen him before?" She explained, "He's too good looking, and I don't want you guys to see him." James was rendered speechless. "Isn't this a little too abusive to a single man like me?" He toothed and waved his hand. "I refuse to be abused by all your lovey-dovey statements. I'll take my leave first." As soon as James left, Daisy threw herself into Knowles' arms. "What took you so long?" Knowles looked down at the person in his arms and chuckled. "I was afraid that you'd be too busy." He rubbed her cheek with his palm. Besides, you're at the peak of your career now. If I were to come looking for you so openly and we were to be photographed by the media, it'd affect your career big time, wouldn't it? She froze in place and stared up at him. Knollys has been in Basberg for so long. Even though he's become one of Tenet's shareholders, he's been keeping quite a low profile and basically doesn't show up publicly. And throughout this period, I've only met him a couple of times. I originally thought he was busy, however, it turns out that he's worried about affecting my career. Knollys approached her with a hoarse voice. Don't look at me like that. She was a little confused. Why? His gaze was fixed on her delicate scarlet lips. If you continue staring at me like that, I will kiss you. Daisy brought her face forward and took the initiative to kiss him on his lips. He was stunned for a split second, ran his thumb over her lips, and smirked. That's very unreserved of you. She lowered her head. By the way, where have you been staying all this time? Knollys squinted. What's wrong? Why ask? She whispered, I'm just asking. He smiled. I'll take you there when I'm ready. Daisy was astonished. What are you getting ready for? Chapter 1899. Knollys leaned into her ear, his breath tickled her, and her oracle flushed. You'll know in a few days. Knollys did not stay long before leaving. They had not seen each other for a few days, but he did not seem to showcase any reluctance to leave and departed quickly. That made Daisy feel empty. After Freya came back, Daisy reiterated what Knollys said to her and asked Freya to analyze it. Could it be that Knollys doesn't like me anymore? Is it because the feelings that he had for me are starting to fade away? Freya took a sip of coffee and could not help but laugh. Daisy Vanderbilt, you've truly been charmed to death. She choked on her own words. No, I haven't. Freya put down the coffee. Don't deny it. Knollys is obviously the fisherman in this relationship, and you're the fish. Your only destiny is to be eaten by him. Knollys is indeed very competent at flirting, and the key to that is to be able to extend and retract one's flirtation freely. In short, playing hard to get has always been his specialty. If he were to be a scumbag, he'd definitely be regarded as Yaramur's top playboy. When he flirts, he knows his limits and how far he can go very well. And when he gets the lady hooked, he'll deliberately leave her hanging and withdraw himself from her to keep things mysterious. What kind of woman will be able to resist that? Even Daisy, who's always been rather unattached to others, has gotten enchanted by his trick. However, Knollys actually isn't leaving her hanging deliberately. I can totally see his intention. He hopes that Daisy will become more active in the relationship, to the point where he's needed more. Who doesn't know that Knollys has been thinking about marrying Daisy since long ago? He's not in a hurry to marry her, nor is he in a hurry to bring the matter up after being in Basberg for so long. Isn't he just waiting for Daisy to take the initiative to bring it up herself? If Colton shared the same EQ as Knollys and knew how to treat a woman like Knollys does, he would definitely not have been scolded. Freya muttered something, but Daisy could not hear it clearly. What about Colton? She paused for a bit and laughed. It's nothing. By the way, Zester has shelved Susan and kicked her out of the crew. Hannah Salvatore will take her role. Daisy was surprised. That's fast. The shelving only took Zester a short while. She's only a B-tier celebrity, while Mitchell is an A-tier, so it's only natural for Zester to side with their A-tier celebrity. She's the one who made her own bed, so she'll have to lie on it herself. Being shelved is already great luck to her. At least she's not being blacklisted by the entire showbiz circle. Susan still had a 3-year contract with Zester, which meant she would have to stay shelved for the remaining 3 years unless she chose to terminate her contract. Unfortunately, not everyone could afford the contract breaching penalty so casually. On the other side of the city, at Black Gold, Colton officially signed a contract with Janus Tech Company in the conference room. Rumors had it that Janus Tech was a technology company that had been established in Yaramur for less than 2 years. but it had a group of elite technicians and advanced equipment. It was said that this new company was indeed strong. Colton walked to the elevator with the representative of Janus Tech. After a short conversation between the two, he asked his assistant to escort him downstairs. The assistant turned back to the administration department and stepped into the office. Mr. Goldman, Janus Tech Company has just been established. How did it manage to recruit so many outstanding scientific and IT prodigies? Colton sat on the leather chair and flipped through the documents. I've checked them out. On the surface, Janus Tech is a new company, but every single person on its board of directors is not someone to be trifled with. They're all owners or leaders of huge enterprises in Yarramore. The assistant was surprised. Could it be that Janus Tech Company is a company that separated from another corporation? This statement sounded more reliable. After all, how could a newly established company have the capital to attract so many big shots to invest in them, let alone hire outstanding scientific and IT prodigies? Colton lifted his gaze. It's not a separation, it's a new company. A separation means that the company is still a subsidiary and independent branch of the mother company. A new company is the establishment of a new startup that doesn't belong to the mother company. Both mean very different things. Chapter 1900. The only difference between the two is that the latter is a new company that's started by a big shot by putting strong foundations into a new shell. So when it's compared to a new company that starts with nothing at its core, Janus Tech doesn't need to think too much. The assistant had doubts. By the way, we don't even know who Janus Tech's founder is until now. That fella has been keeping his identity an enigma, and we don't even know if this is a shady company. Janus Tech has many big enterprises backing it up. Do you think there's a chance that this is a shady company? Colton tapped his fingertips on the document. The company's founder seems to have concealed his identity on purpose, but for how much longer can he do so? The assistant felt that it made sense, so he was a little more reassured. When he walked to the door and was about to leave the office, Colton suddenly stopped him. Wait. He turned his head and asked, Mr. Goldman, is there anything else that I can help you with? Colton's eyes shifted from side to side. Keep an eye out for any villa that's for sale in Bassburg recently. The assistant asked, do you plan to purchase a villa? Colton lifted his gaze, but did not utter a single word. The assistant realized that he had crossed a line and nodded. Leave it to me. He left the office, and as soon as he stopped in front of the elevator, he saw a woman walking out of the elevator. It was Giselle. The assistant suddenly realized that she was the one who had made the appointment 2 hours ago. He was polite and nodded at her. Miss Peterson. Giselle nodded and smiled back at him. Is Mr. Goldman in? The assistant led her to the office door, knocked on the door, and got Colton's permission to enter. Giselle pushed the door in with a smile. I hope you won't mind me bothering you. The assistant stepped back and closed the door. Colton put down the document with a slightly polite attitude. How is this a bother? You've come to me with some tasks at hand. I left in a hurry the other day because something came up. I should be the one who hopes that you won't mind the rude treatment. Giselle lowered her gaze and let off a smile. You had something to attend to, so I don't mind that. Speaking of which, there's something that you wished to talk to me about that day. He knew Giselle as Mr. Peterson had introduced her to him. He wanted his daughter to inherit Cloud Capital Incorporated, so he had asked Colton to give Giselle more guidance in the business field. Colton had agreed for the sake of the father. Although she was a ballet dancer before this, she had quite some insights into the business field, so she was fairly sophisticated and nowhere near being a rookie when it came to talking business. It was. No wonder Mr. Peterson wanted her to take over Cloud Capital Incorporated. She invited him to a meal the other day, saying that she had something to talk to him about, and it was indeed rude for him to leave her alone at the restaurant. Giselle smiled. Actually, it's not a big deal. I'm to take over Cloud Capital Incorporated, but when it comes to a company's management, my father is worried that I won't be able to master it. As such, He wants me to stay at Black Gold for some time as an intern. After saying that, she gave off a helpless expression. I originally wanted to discuss this matter with you the other day. Colton nodded. You can come to the company tomorrow and meet with Leonardo. He'll be your direct superior and guide you during your time here. But can't you guide me personally? Colton frowned and took off the pen cap. You'll be taking over Cloud Capital Incorporated in the future, so I don't think I'm the most appropriate candidate to be teaching you about managing a company. She laughed out loud. I know that, but Mr. Goldman, you're really slow when it comes to jokes, huh? I'm only here for an internship. That makes me nothing more than an ordinary staff member, so no matter what, the owner of the company can't teach me things personally. It was just a joke, but Coleman actually took it seriously. It's no wonder that they'd say he's a workaholic. Work is all he cares about, and he's more rigid than his father, Nolan Goldman, when it comes to anything work-related. But this also shows that he'll take something very seriously, whether it's work or a relationship. Giselle left Black Gold, and the driver was already waiting for her at the company entrance. She got into the car, picked up her cell phone, and called her father. Dad, I've already met with Mr. Goldman and talked to him about my internship at Black Gold. He agreed to it.